Welcome to the Fathering Strong podcast, where we connect, engage, and empower fathers to be the best dads they can be for their families and communities. And now, your hosts are Bruce Stapleton and Pastor Eli Williams.
Welcome, everybody. This is the Fathering Strong podcast. I'm Eli Williams, and we are delighted that you are with us today. And as a guest, I have Mitch McClain. Mitch and I made our acquaintance not too long ago, and I was so intrigued by his fatherhood story that I thought our audience would really enjoy this. So, Mitch, welcome to the Fathering Strong podcast. Glad to have you here.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
We like to share people's fatherhood story. So we'll give you an opportunity to talk about everything from your relationship with your father, good, bad, ugly, indifferent, and your own experience as a father or a co-parent during your own fathering journey. So thanks for being with us today. And of course, you can share with us anything else that you have a passion for here on Fathering Strong. So let's get started with you telling us a little bit about yourself. And let's start with life growing up for little Mitch McClain.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Urbana, Ohio. My dad was one of the local pharmacists. Interesting story there. My dad was 12 years old at an old time tent revival where he chased a girl that he kind of liked. And while he was at this tent revival, he said that God told him that he was to grow up and be a pharmacist and to teach people why they should not take drugs. So, which is kind of contrary to a lot of pharmacists today. So he felt it was really important to educate people on specifically things that would be in the antidepressant world, things like that. So that was his mission. He carried it out well and was both beloved and respected in our community. Mom and dad were really very active in one of the local churches there, where they served as youth leaders for the church we went to. They did everything from every committee that the church had. I can promise you at one point, one or the other was a chairman or a chair lady of that organization. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for most of my growing up years. Wasn't until we got into probably maybe junior high that she took on a job at our church's daycare center as a teacher there, where she ultimately ended up as the director for, probably 25 years. They were June and Ward Cleaver. We grew up in that kind of household. We had family dinners together. My mom made sure everything was done so that when my dad got home from work, we were able to be a family. They believed in hard work, put my sister and I to work at the drugstore probably when we were probably 12, 10, maybe probably closer to 12. And before that, we had a paper route that we would get up every morning before school and throw papers on. We weren't allowed to throw them on the porch. We were required by my parents to put it in the mailbox so nobody would have to bend over to pick up their newspaper. So that's a small glimpse into the little town of Urbana, Ohio on Amherst Drive where I grew up.
Beautiful little town. I always loved Urbana. I worked there. I don't know if you knew that or not, but I did work at the local radio station. It was WCOM FM at the time.
I remember.
And I was there during that transition over to WKSW. That tells you how old I am.
Yes.
But I've got some fond memories of Urbana. In fact, I met my wife in Urbana.
Okay.
At a little bar called, I think it was J&D Lounge. I forget now. But anyway, I want to hear about your relationship with your dad.
Okay.
Yeah. Talk to us.
So my dad was a great man. Like I said, beloved, respected. People would come to him for advice. People would come to him when they needed help. He was in the neighborhood or in the community, really. He's the one who would be building the ramp for somebody who had a wheelchair and needed access to their home. He would pick people up and give them a ride. He was very well respected, and I can only think of literally in my lifetime only meeting maybe one person who did not have positive things to say about my dad, and that was over a business situation, which I promise you was probably more of a misunderstanding than anything. The challenge is that's not what I got at home. So my dad was big on lessons. Looking back on it, there are a lot of lessons that I learned from my dad that are relevant to me in my life today. Couldn't be more grateful for those lessons and the role that he played in my life. However, it came in a very harsh, very demanding, lack of patience for his son, which wasn't necessarily demonstrated towards my sister at all. I have one sister, older, 3 years older. So I always said that my dad created a lot of wounds, emotional wounds, and my mom did a remarkable job of licking those wounds. So she sometimes maybe overcompensated in a way that she wanted to make sure that I felt worth and had value. But my dad did the best my dad knew how to do, based upon the way he grew up. But he would throw a ball with me. But that's really about all I can remember that my dad ever did with or for me. He worked hard, so I understood that he wasn't at my baseball games, things like that, because my mom did a really good job of explaining that dad had to work, and she partnered with him to make sure that messaging was received in a positive way for us kids. But his patience for me was short. I've always said that, jokingly, one of the best things about little boys are when they go home, because they're busy all the time, right? I have 3 girls, so when I'm around little boys, they're fun for a while, but then they're just so busy and rambunctious, and it's like nonstop. Well, I was like every other little boy. That's how I was, and after a long day at work, man, he just didn't have any patience for it. So he was really hard on me. It was known within the household he was hard on me. And my sister loved it because she had a partner in crime against her little brother. And I've often joked with my sister that all the baggage I have in life are because of her and dad. But my dad had a transformational moment. I would have been probably late in high school, maybe beginning of college, when he went on a spiritual retreat called the Walk to Emmaus. There may be some people that are familiar with that.
Sure.
And it changed who he was as a person. And really, it was about that time that I think I began to hear my dad tell me, that I can remember hearing my dad tell me that he loved me. Up until that time, it was rocky. And after that, we began to develop a relationship. Fortunately, that happened very quickly. And he became my best friend. I look back, it helped me later in life. I began to understand what he was trying to do as a father, that he just kind of did in the wrong approach, at least the approach that I needed. I got one great story I could share if you'd like, but we became the best of friends. He's the person I would go to for advice. And really, when the time's right, during our conversation today, I'll share with you really a story that I think wraps up where our relationship finished, as he contracted a very rare cancer and ended up passing away at the age of 58.
Oh, much too young. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry to hear that. How long ago was that?
So September of 1999 is when he passed. So this is the 25th anniversary of his passing in September.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny, Eli, we look back on that as a family, and we look at it in a situation where it was some of the greatest blessings of our lives came during that time frame. And obviously, the greatest tragedy that we've experienced in our family happened at the same time. But we unapologetically tell people that Dad did a really good job of showing us how to live, but he did an even better job showing us how to die.
Have you been able to forgive him for those years during your youth when you did not experience his love?
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. And it didn't take long. I mean, you could see the change in him. It was, I love my dad. I always loved my dad. My dad was always my idol. Growing up, I still wanted to be my dad, even though he was so tough on me. I will say that I look back now. I can tell the story to you, but I tell the story to you with no ill will in my heart at all. My dad was, I can now say that if I grow up to be, listen to me at 57, when I grow up, if I could be half the man my dad was, I'll be twice the man I could have ever hoped to have been. And, not a day, well, a day goes by, but not many weeks go by that even after 25 years, that there's not something I wish that I could share with my dad, a challenge for advice or to just, share a victory that I've just experienced. So no ill will and total forgiveness.
Excellent.
In every way. In fact, I probably don't even remember all the hurt based upon that forgiveness.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's a blessing. Everybody's not there. Every man has not progressed that far in their forgiveness journey.
Yeah.
So just hearing your story, hopefully will give some inspiration, some encouragement to some father who's listening right now, who is currently still in the hurt stage, the father wound stage. What would you say to someone who's listening right now and they're very much in the throes of experiencing a father who is perhaps abusive or distant or just outright mean? What would you say?
Yeah. Honestly, I that's hard for me because that wasn't the father that I ended up with. I would just say that in the midst of all that, I think I was probably too young to understand how to pray through that. As I got older, it probably still didn't happen because, part of my story with my dad is, me coming to a point where I had to own my own faith, which I'm happy to share as well. But what I would say is I always respected my dad, regardless of how I felt I was being unfairly treated. And at my heart's core, I still loved my dad. But I do think that scripture is pretty clear that it's okay to draw boundaries. But I would just say that I would encourage everybody to just kind of work towards that forgiveness. Understand that your dad's probably doing the best that he can do. He brings with him baggage that we probably can't understand, even if we know what stimulated or what caused that baggage.
Yeah.
At the same time, we don't really understand what he might be carrying. And I try to filter not just my father's, but everyone's actions or their treatment of me. I try to filter it through their heart as opposed to necessarily their words and their actions. And we're just all trying to figure out this thing called life. And if you understand and can embrace the fact that we all do that in different ways and at a different pace, I do think that can help you to, if you just filter what they say and what they do through the condition of their heart, I think that can go a long way.
Very good. My guest today is Mitch McClain, and we're talking fatherhood. As usual, he's sharing with us his story. And after this short time out, I'll ask Mitch about his fathering journey. now that he has grown up and has children, daughters, I believe. We'll hear his story about that after this break. Stay with us. This is the Fathering Strong podcast.
We dads and father figures need each other. We need a safe, non-judgmental place to share our stories, challenges, heartaches, and joys. Fathering Strong is just such a place. A new online community of connected, engaged, and empowered fathers. Learn more at www.fatheringstrong.com.
Welcome back. This is the Fathering Strong podcast. I'm Eli Williams, your host. Bruce Stapleton is the man behind the camera. He's doing the hard work. We get to have the fun with our guests, and Mitch McClain is our guest today. And we opened by Mitch sharing with us his life as a child growing up in the Mitchell household, and quite a bit about his relationship with his father. To wrap that up, Mitch, tell us, if you will, about your father's last days and how you all, him included, got through that.
So there's a couple things I love to share about that. The first one is to give you just a little bit of background. My father was diagnosed with a very rare cancer that develops in the liver. Typically, that is a pretty quick death sentence. This would have been back in the late 80s or very early 90s. He was diagnosed with this from a routine blood count and ended up all the cancer they thought was contained. So they did something very rare and they gave him a liver transplant, which he rejected. He had a second liver transplant and then went back to work and worked for another 8 or 9 years before his cancer returned. And that began the end of his life. So just 2 quick stories I'd love to share. The first one is I wanted my dad to be on camera. I wanted my children who were never going to meet him. I wanted them to get a glimpse as to who their grandfather was. So we sat down with a camera and we went through his entire life. And there were some awesome things that he told in there. My dad at this point in his life was so kind that there were times where he made me shut off the camera because there were things he was willing to tell me that he didn't want to be recorded because he didn't want the person that he would be talking about to hear what he was going to say and then their feelings be heard. Primarily, those things revolved around my grandfather, who was still living. But at the very end, Eli, I love this. At the very end of this recording that we did, I said to him, "Okay, Dad, here's your chance. What's the one thing you've always wanted to tell Mom that you never have? Or what's the one thing you'd like to correct with her that you never took the opportunity to do?" And this was his response. He said, "I have nothing." He said, "Mitch, I have lived my life making sure that everybody knew how I felt, making sure that everyone understood who I was and what I thought about our relationship. And if there's one thing I can encourage you to do, it's to live your life in a way that nothing is left unspoken." So from that moment on, that's how I've tried to live my life. So everybody knows and there's nothing left unspoken. But the greatest thing about my dad is as he was nearing the hospice days, I can remember saying to him, "Dad, I'm really sorry that this is happening to you." And to understand a little bit, my life was kind of sideways at that point. Really wasn't living in any way, shape, or form that reflected the values and the beliefs that I was brought up in. You know, the church I grew up in, was kind of living life for myself. And through the course of his transplant experiences and ultimately his death, I began to reestablish, I guess, my own relationship with the Lord. I think before that, I was living my parents' faith and not living my own. Anyway, all that to say that my dad said, "You know, Mitch, before this happened, you were kind of living life the wrong way. And it wasn't until this happened to me that you began to get your life in order. So, don't feel sorry for me, because I think in the eyes of heaven, my life for your soul is a fair trade." And that's the dad that I choose to remember. That's the father that made up for all the mistakes prior. So there you go.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's powerful, Mitch.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. So that's quite a lot that you experienced with your dad.
Yeah.
And what impact has all that had on your own parenting as a father?
Yeah. Yeah. So I had a great, a great upbringing in that I got to see what I didn't want to be, and I got to see what I wanted to be. So I made a commitment very early that I was going to be an intentional father. When my oldest daughter was born, I can remember holding her in my arms and saying two things to her, like, I will be here for you forever and you will never see me leave. So I made a commitment to all three of them when they were born that I was going to be the best dad that I could be. So I would go to regional things where it was on parenting. I would go and just listen to see what tips I could pick up. I read two books that I cannot recommend highly enough. The first book was a book entitled The Heritage. It was written by Otis Stillwell. It can be difficult to find. I think it transformed into like more of a course, like, maybe something that a church would do or something of that nature. But at the core of the book, it said, it doesn't matter what you experienced as a kid, you have, or as a child, as a child of your parents, that you have the ability to break that curse if it was negative. And it compared it to a gown, right? It said you may have been given a gown of rags, but you can hand on to your children a beautiful, hand-stitched, custom-made, perfectly fashioned gown onto your kids. And I took that to heart. So I love it. I love the book and that story. The other one was a James Dobson book that's called Raising Girls. Can't comment on Raising Boys. Haven't read that one, but I have three daughters, so Raising Girls. And what I took out of that book was every girl is going to develop their self-worth based upon their relationship with a man. And that can either be you as their father, or that can be somebody else who's trying to establish their own objectives with her. So I took that to heart, and I started at an early age. But even if you haven't done this early, you can still do this late. And what I did is I began to take them out on dates. It started out at the donut shop. We talked about whatever they wanted to talk about, whether it was Barbies or, princesses or fairies, whatever it was, we talked about. And it began to establish a flow of communication between the two of us that otherwise would have been unlikely to exist. When they got older, I would take them out on a different kind of date. I would talk to them about how a gentleman treats a lady, and how we would go out on a date and I would open her car door. If we went to a restaurant, I would pay the check. I would open the door to the restaurant or to the mall or wherever we were going, explaining along the way why I was doing those things and what a gentleman does for a lady. Because I've also taught them that we live in a world that is kind of lost in a lot of ways, and that men need to own their fair share of the degradation of that. But women also need to own their fair shares because they stopped expecting excellence. So I said, you need to expect excellence. You need to communicate, what you expect, and that as difficult as it'll be, when it's time for you to find your partner, that will come based upon not emotions, not strictly emotions, although they're not unimportant, but also upon reason and logic, right? So if you want a gentleman and you're dating somebody who's not a gentleman, I don't know what would make you think that's going to change if you were to get married. So I've just tried really intentionally to teach them what to expect and to validate them. Like, so I'm divorced. You mentioned co-parenting earlier. The only thing I would correct in your statement is I'm always going to be a father regardless of whether or not I'm co-parenting. But that comes with a challenge, specifically with my middle daughter. My middle daughter has a strained relationship with her mother. I look at their mother, very much the way I look at my own father, just trying to figure out this thing that we call life. And sometimes those decisions reflect negatively on but have negative impact on our children. And for whatever reason, the two of them, they struggle. So in a lot of ways, I've had to figure out how to play the role of mom and dad. Like, I want to be direct like my dad was. Like, I don't know how to sugarcoat. I'm not very good at it. So I try really hard to strike. It's forced me to strike a balance between who I am, who I want to be, and what she needs. So that's another big piece of encouragement, is that I would also remind dads that it's not about who you are and what you are. It's also about what your child needs. And sometimes that means, as the adult, we have to kind of change our approach, or we have to kind of tweak our approach in order for it to not only be heard, but for it to be meaningful, impactful in a positive way and not a negative way.
So you talked about, you have 3 daughters, right? And you talked about the one that has the estranged relationship with the mother. What about the other 2? Have you seen the fruit of your, what sounds to me, excellent parenting of these girls?
Well, I don't know if it's excellent. I just always said that, my list of faults is probably longer than most, but efforting to be a good dad is not on that list. So my oldest daughter, it's funny because sometimes I feel like we're strained a little bit, only for her to come back and repeat the lesson that I've tried to teach, whatever that might be. And despite me feeling like sometimes I didn't handle something correctly, she will tell me, "Dad, I still tell people all the time, you're my best friend." So, and that's a compliment to me. But at the same time, I want to be looked at as a good father more than I do being viewed as a best friend. Because sometimes you have the approach is different, right? So I'm not accountable someday when I die and I stand before God. He's not going to ask me if I was a good friend. He's going to ask me if I was a good father. So actually, I already know the answer to that, but, so I never try to be my kid's friend. There are times in which we are friendly, and there are times in which we do things. But for me, I always keep at its heart that I'm their dad first, and that is what I'm held accountable for. I would also say that it's very different to want to be a parent than it is to want kids, right? So if you're planning a family, sometimes things happen unplanned. But if you're planning a family, I would say that the timing for that is correct when you're ready to be a parent, not because you want kids, because they're 2 completely different things. But my baby, she's a senior in high school this year. It's kind of hard to believe, but she is just, what she needs is so different than the other 2. Like, I'll just say candidly, and, we are, I think, pretty open about mental health. But my older 2 daughters have experience, and they've earned whatever mental health issues they have. Both having some particular things that happen to them that cause them to have to deal with emotions in a way that no kid should ever have to deal with them. But that hasn't been the experience for my youngest, and my youngest is just so gentle, so gentle, has such a sweet spirit about her. She's always said from when she was little, Mom and Dad are my 2 favorite people in the world. And regardless of where I ranked that week, based upon maybe a disciplinary action or something, I still feel like that's pretty good. Top 2 in the whole world. That's pretty good. She, I just, back to the dating thing and the conversational piece, my middle daughter, I was the first person she told me when she had her first menstrual cycle. I mean, what dad has that privilege, first of all, because it's so scary for them. I didn't know what to do, but that is all based upon that flow of communication and them feeling comfortable. There's nothing that they haven't gone through in life that we haven't been able to talk about, even the things they knew I wouldn't want to hear. And I think that's true with the youngest as well. She's a little bit quieter and more reserved, but I would trade everything else away in my life, before I would the change of the relationships I have with them, because I do feel like it's positive in virtually every sense of the word.
Mitch, we are so grateful for you being willing to come on and to talk candidly about your fathering, your relationship with your own dad, and your relationship with your daughters. It has been really inspiring. And we pray that there's some dad who is drawing encouragement from what they've heard from you today. We're going to wrap things up after we take this final time out. This is the Fathering Strong podcast. I'm Eli Williams. My guest today is Mitch McClain, and we'll be back after this.
Do you know a new father who could benefit from a basic introduction to healthy fathering principles? POPS 101, a free online course consisting of 4 one-hour sessions in English or Spanish, could be perfect for him. POPS 101 lays out practical steps toward becoming the protector, order keeper, provider, and stabilizer his child needs. Learn more at urbanlight.org.
This is the Fathering Strong podcast. Eli Williams here. My guest is Mitch McClain. We're grateful, Mitch. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I want to wrap things up with you sharing, you're a great father. We've heard that. Kudos to you for that. Tell us about your work to kind of wrap things out. What is it that Mitch McClain does for a profession, to a living, and what really gets you up in the morning?
Yeah, so I grew up in a household where I think it was pretty clear it was okay to make money, but at the same time, we were a family that gave back. So I chose a career in sales, and it sounds kind of contradictory, but I chose it in medical device sales. So I started my career. I was fortunate, pretty much right out of college. I was hired by an orthopedic total joint company, and it was a journey. I literally was hired, given a catalog, and said, "Go get them." So I had to kind of figure this whole thing out on my own. I spent from 1990 to 2015 in total joint sales. Had a very successful career there. I'll tie it in with fathering real quick. My first job was a sales rep role. I was an independent contractor and I loved it. I excelled at it, became a top rep for the company. But after we had kids, I learned that my middle daughter, who we spoke a little bit about, didn't really like her dad because her dad was gone all the time. And so I got to a point where I had to make a decision, let this job continue to consume me or make a change. So I decided to make a change, went to a competitive company because in the independent contractor role, there is no management role. So I took a job with a competitive company where I served as a sales manager. And my kids used to say, "Dad, we love your new company because it's like we won the daddy lottery," because it completely changed my lifestyle, what was expected of me in the evening hours and on weekends. Had some leadership changes there that were a struggle for me, so I left there and really could not find what it was. I felt that was a part of me, like it was my first professional love. And I jumped from one to another to a third job, and none of them were fulfilling. When I got a phone call from a recruiter that connected me with the CEO and founder of the company I currently work for, which is a company called Horizon Infusions, where I serve as director of growth. What we do as a company is we provide an ambulatory infusion setting, meaning that it's outside of the hospital. We have a clinic here in Springfield, but we have 21 centers across the state of Ohio where we basically provide infusion services for chronically ill patients. We typically would think about a chemotherapy patient as an infusion patient, which is completely accurate, but we don't do that type of treatment. So we only do chronic. We don't do acute. So ulcerative colitis, Alzheimer's is a new area for us. Asthma, severe asthma. So there's, probably 70 different drugs that we administer for that. And I lead all the growth efforts for that. In my spare time, I love to play golf, and I consider myself to be kind of an amateur furniture maker. I do it for fun. And I usually throw away more than I keep, which means that, a table probably costs me $600 to build, but it's fun doing.
We should probably talk about that. That sounds very interesting to me. Mitch McClain, my guest today on the Fathering Strong podcast. It has been a delight to get to know you better, and we're grateful for your transparency, your frankness, and complete honesty in sharing your story with our audience. Thank you so much, Mitch.
Thank you.
We invite those who are watching to take advantage of the many resources available at fatheringstrong.com, urbanlight.org. You'll find our archived podcasts, our weekly blog posts, lots of everything from research articles to my book, The Father Love, to our courses, Pops 101, and others. Plus, there is the Fathering Strong app where you can download the app and find a community of fathers that is perfect for you, or you can start one if there's not one that's perfect for you. That's the Fathering Strong app. All of that is available at fatheringstrong.com. Check it out, and let us hear from you as to what you think about our offerings and what might even make Fathering Strong better in 2025. So again, thanks for being with us today, and we look forward to you being also on the other end of fatheringstrong.com. I'm Eli Williams. God bless you.
Fathering Strong is powered by Urban Light Ministries, a not-for-profit organization serving the needs of families and children for nearly 30 years. Your support helps us continue turning the hearts of fathers to their children while meeting some of the immediate critical needs of struggling families with small children. Contributions of all sizes are welcomed at www.urbanlight.org.
The Fathering Strong podcast is a production of Urban Light Ministries, with technical assistance from the Momentum Group, and Harold Rayford provides the theme music. So thank you for listening.